This episode is brought to you by Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar.com. Use cardkingdom.com/studies to help support the show, and pick up some magic cards that have cool, novel, elaborate, or poetic card names.
Now today we had a big contrast in temperature across the UK, just 12 degrees over coastal parts of eastern England with cloudy skies. Just up the road from Llanfair Pwllgwyn, gallwch go Drobol, Llantysilio Gogogoch.
This is weatherman and news anchor Liam Dutton. He's feeling what the British may call rather chuffed after nailing the pronunciation of this tiny town in northwest Wales.
The temperature got to 21 Celsius, that's 70 in Fahrenheit.
Elsewhere along the eastern coast of the UK that day, storm clouds were sending lightning across the sky. If only Dutton could have commented on the thunderous clap that follows the bolt, the sound that James Joyce called
Ba 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 dal gara takaminaron con bron tonoron tuon tun truvara hu non scon tu hu orden and turnok.
This is but one of 10 thunder words in Finnegan's Wake, each of them 100 letters long except for the last, which has 101, making up a total of 1001 collectively, a nod to the 1001 nights of Arabic folklore. This term in particular is an amalgamation of the word thunder as translated and anglicized from various languages, mashed together to describe the boom that accompanied Adam and Eve's fall from grace. Joyce had fun with words, to say the least, and I could see our beloved weatherman taking a shot at this term the next time it storms in England.
Her birth certificate is 2 feet long. She has the longest personal name in the world, and we want to ask her mother, what were you thinking?
Perhaps in an alternate timeline, Liam Dutton is not a news anchor, but rather the host of a daytime talk show in the mid-1990s and in charge of interviewing the girl with over 1,000 letters in her name.
What is her name?
It's about Shandy and Tonation Vision Kitchen Time and Drew Lender Shirkane Rockwell. Ninja Shimika Shana Tamika Shawa Himian Shakani Satsan Junish Marine Kunsai.
Instead of Oprah, who was so condescending about the novelty, Liam Dutton would have undoubtedly learned Jamie Charnel's full name and addressed her in its entirety.
Well now, that is about the most unique thing I've heard lately.
Or maybe Liam Dutton's oratory expertise would be better utilized in the theater, his skills deserving of a role in the chorus of The Assemblywomen by Aristophanes. At the end of the play, Blepyrus and the audience are summoned to feast, and the evening's main dish is served. Here's what's for dinner, in the original Greek. Like James Joyce's Thunderwords, this term divides into a list of ingredients which make up a very elaborate stew. Perhaps such a dish could find a home in the Underworld cookbook among the handwritten recipes of a chef with an equally elaborate name. If only Liam Dutton played Magic the Gathering, I have a feeling that Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar would be among his favorite characters, if nothing more than for her brimming title bar, and the way it defines and defies the limits of a card name. Just months before the debut of Ravnica City of Guilds in 2005, Matt Cavada wrote the seminal article titled Say My Name that detailed the formalities of naming magic cards. Cavada likens this difficult task to a cross between an obstacle course and a high bar routine, emphasizing that the process creates more limitations than meet the eye when reading over the finished product. Successful magic card names like Fog, Sizzle, and Necropotence, for example, all check the box for different reasons. The imagery of getting lost in a blanket of mist synergizes with the mechanic of blanking combat damage for a turn, since your creatures can't see anything. Sizzle is an onomatopoeia that rolls off the tongue and stylishly complements the color red, and Necropotence is an old linguistic trick of combining two familiar morphemes into one to form a new concept or idea. Thoughtseize is another standout example of this concept. Most importantly, each card here delivers on the high fantasy flavor for which Magic is known, and creates immersion while playing the game. Weaker card names like Snow Devil or Guardian Angel are failures because they conflict with player expectations and lead to confusion in gameplay. Neither of these two cards are creatures like their names would lead you to believe. Cavada also highlights how writers must be cognizant of other cards in a set while crafting names. Quicksliver and Clickslither, for example, were both in Legions, but despite sounding similar, the latter is an insect and doesn't count toward the Sliver tribe. Sometimes card name confusion cross-pollinates with the creative team. The most glaring example of this error is on the card Hyalopterus Lemure. Artist Richard Thomas delivered on the Hyalopterus side of the art brief, a fictional term meaning glassy wings, but painted a lemur instead of a lemur, a creature that has origins in the D&D monster manual as a type of lesser spirit. 11 years later, in Time Spiral, this mistake showed up tongue-in-cheek in the flavor text of a more aptly painted card. Present in the Time Spiral block was also one of the most narrow self-references in Magic's history, and it was hiding in the title line. Rigid Q-Sight is the culprit, an anagram of Guided Strike, which calls back to a card in Weatherlight with similar mechanics but in an enemy color. This card is one of many anagrams in Magic, and it provides an example of how wordplay can inform the naming of cards and double as Easter eggs for enfranchised players. Feldegriff, the beloved purple hippopotamus on wings, is another anagram, this time referencing the name of the game's legendary creator. Pemin's aura also points back to the real world, to another superhero with a suit but without a PhD. This enchantment is a mechanical echo of Morphling, a card that tournament players nickname Superman because of all its abilities. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is probably now better known by his nickname Gary, a slight rearrangement of that first word in the title bar. Sometimes nicknames take shape before cards are sent off to the creative team. During development, playtest names serving as placeholders can lead to inside jokes for members of R&D. They can even show up in the art briefs. At the exhibit of GP Vegas 2017, I saw sketches of Mark Zugg's Coiling Oracle, which at one point was called Manaconda. Now, beyond the self-referential, the outliers, the standouts, and the mistakes, card names have the function of carrying the cognitive load of the game, and they inform how we think and speak about Magic.
Oh, wow.
Chain look what he found off of that Canyon Slough. It does mean he doesn't get back the Scrap Heap Scrounger, but he'll take the upgrade here. Goblin Chain Whirler.
If he blocks Hazaret the Fervent, he takes 3 from the Chain Whirler, goes down to 4, and then Gregor Kowalski does have that Lethal Ribbons, which would be a Ribbons 4/4, so he actually
just
cannot
no
attack
even possible here.
He will lose both of his Chain Whirlers, and Kowalski will still have that Hazaret on the battlefield.
We can look at a few examples of average card names to analyze how our expectations as players align with these invisible conventions. Consider Aegis Turtle, Dark Bargain, and Enhance the Human from Ikoria. Without seeing the entire text, we can deduce the mechanics, the colors, even the rarities entirely from the card names. These 3 are most likely commons. The first is probably a blue creature with low power and high toughness. The second is probably a black sorcery that draws cards in exchange for life, and the third is probably a white enchantment that benefits one of Ikoria's main tribes. Moving up the ladder, a card like Yadaro Wandering Monster is likely a legendary creature with a higher rarity and stronger stats. That comma is pulling a lot of the weight here, as does the definite article on cards like Karuga the Macro Sage and Umori the Collector. Similarly, the Ozolith evokes a significant and unique artifact in a way that Ozolith does not. By itself, Ozolith could be the plane's currency, or an adjective denoting a location, or a type of giant green monster. This is why players bemoans the World Tree of Kaldheim as a generic land rather than a legendary one. It is proof of how sensitive we are to these conventions and how names must deliver on these expectations. As such, if you sensed an imposter among us in this list, you'd be correct. Enhance the Human isn't a card. I made it up. And it could never be a useful card name. It's too vanilla, it lacks meaningful fantasy flavor, it sounds uninspired. The game has a higher quality bar to clear. So naming Magic cards matters for aligning with player expectations, for brand ambassadorship, and for communicating the game's high fantasy aesthetic. But naming Magic cards is also part of gameplay itself. A few years ago, I made a video on Pithing Needle, the most infamous generator of bad beat stories that revolve around naming cards in-game. The most divisive of these stories took place in January 2016, when Bradley Carpenter cast Pithing Needle and named Borborygmos upon resolution. In response, his opponent Bob Huang took a moment to think, got out of his seat to talk to a judge, then on his next turn proceeded to cast Goryo's Vengeance, putting Borborygmos Enraged into play. After attacking, Huang activated Borborygmos Enraged, claiming that Carpenter didn't name the correct card with Pithing Needle, and killed him on the spot. This led to many heated debates about ethics in tournaments, and an eventual rules change to favor Carpenter's side with regards to player intent.
When this guy named Borborygmos, everybody knows what he's talking about. It's the win condition of your deck. That's what I'm casting Pithing Needle on. You know, how can you then say, no, you named the card that exists in Magic, but it's not the one that's in my deck? Clearly, this guy was trying to name the card that kills you, in which case this was Borborygmos Enraged.
I thought a lot about this story when Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar was previewed in June 2021. I thought about players casting Pithing Needle to nullify her activated abilities, and how they'd have to communicate that during a game. Like almost everyone at the time, I didn't know how to pronounce this card name. At first glance, it looked like gibberish, like another inside joke from R&D. But there was one person who knew, who had known for almost 2 years, who had told the Magic World back in September 2019 that such a card could never be printed, and encouraged everyone to give up hope of ever seeing her in a legitimate Magic set.
The issue, of course, with making a Magic card of Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar is that Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar doesn't actually fit on the top of a Magic card where we would put the name of the card. So I don't think we're going to be seeing Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar on a Magic card anytime soon, except of course in flavor text.
But they were all of them deceived.
So what changed? How did we break the rules and find space in the title line to print such a convoluted card? To find out, I knew I had to go to the source.
My name's Ethan Fleischer. I'm a senior game designer at Wizards of the Coast, working on Magic almost exclusively. I was the lead designer of Modern Horizons 2, and my favorite Magic card that I designed was from pretty early in my career when each card really counted, Feldon of the Third Path, which I think is one of the top 3 saddest Magic cards of all time.
After approaching Ethan with these same questions, I learned that the original video from September 2019 was not what it seemed. It was a trap.
The card was put into the file months before the video was made, so I already knew that this card was in the works. And then I was worried that, oh, is anyone going to care when this card comes out? And so I wanted to kind of make people want it and help people get the joke. And so it was like, you can't have this. The name is too long, it can't be done. You're not going to see it anytime soon. And so, of course, when you tell people that they can't have a thing, they want a thing.
Ethan knew the card name was of the perfect length to fit in the title bar, but it required eliminating the mana cost, which heavily informed mechanics and design. After reaching out to the proxy guy, the resident expert on all things formatting, I learned that the physical canvas size of a normal Magic card is 63mm wide by 88mm tall. Abiding to current conventions, that means there is space in the title line for roughly 31 characters written in Balearan font, size 9.5. Due to the initiative of Time Spiral Remastered, however, Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar also needed to work with the pre-modern card frame formatting that uses the font Gaudi Medieval. As long as the card had no casting cost, it would fit there too. But then again, cards with longer names have been printed in years past without this limitation. Okina, Temple to the Grandfathers, for example, has 33 characters total, 2 more than Asmor, as does
Liliana, die ketzerische Heilerin,
which not only has a casting cost but requires 2 black mana symbols and 1 generic, crowding the title line further. But even Liliana Heretical Healer does not hold a flame to
Marcheur de Chaîne de la Halle aux Viscères,
the French version of Gorehouse Chainwalker, which has 44 characters in their name and 2 pips in the mana cost. Well, another hidden rule that R&D respects for cards printed in English is the typeface faux pas of distorting text.
Well, the fact that at our normal font size, the card name exactly filled the title bar on the top of a Magic card was something I was very conscious of as I was working on it. Obviously, we can and have shrunk the font size, but I hate it when we do that. I hate doing that.
Okina, Temple to the Grandfathers is an example of squeezing text to fit into the title line. A more subtle solution without changing the font size would be to slightly shrink the spaces between letters and words, a technique called kerning. Here's Okina with the kerning treatment. In this case, the integrity of the font remains intact, and the card blends in better with others from the same set and era. All of these examples, though, are names made up of multiple words with spaces between them, and translation, of course, adds wrinkles that are not present on English versions. But that's not the case for our beloved card in question. Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar is one long, uninterrupted word that had to fit at normal font size without exceptions. And that's because it's the proper name of a character whose origins are as old as the game itself. Back in 1993, in Magic's very first set, Alpha, the name appeared in the flavor text of this innocuous 2/2 flyer, Granite Gargoyle. The character we know now, however, is much different than what Ethan Fleischer suspected she was back then.
I suspect, and I haven't talked to Richard Garfield about this, but I suspect that the original intent was that Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar was the name of a demon. Just based on how other cards in Alpha are named. Sarah Angel means serrated angel. Shivan Dragon is a reference to Shiva. Perhaps Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar is a reference to Asmodeus, which is a demon from Jewish legend.
Over the years, however, the novelty grew into a fully formed character who was not a demon, but rather a servant of one. Found in the Distant Plains anthology is the novella titled Chef's Surprise, written by Sonia Orrin Lyris. Here we learn of Asmore's troubled relationship with a demon named Vincent, who Lyris chose as a reference to Vincent Price, the American actor best known for his roles in horror films. In the story, Asmore is in charge of cooking new dishes every day for the demon, and her recipes are eventually published in the Underworld cookbook. One of these recipes is the proper way to prepare granite gargoyles, thus solidifying the reference from the original card where she first appeared into the canon of Magic lore. In 2004, Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar showed up again in the flavor text of a card called Sauté. Here, we find another excerpt from the Underworld cookbook, this time instructing readers on the best way to prepare beebles. This card is from Unhinged, Magic's second parody set following Unglued, and is a perfect tonal match to the chef's outlandish name. It feels more at home in a silver border. The set also provided us with the longest Magic card name in history, but as you can see here, it lacks all respect for the title line. The final iteration of Asmore was printed in Modern Horizons 2. Alongside the supplemental Underworld cookbook, we can piece together the whole story from the Distant Plains anthology and understand the difficulty of printing this card in black borders. The third ability here is especially insightful into the subtleties of card design. Aaron Forsyth commented in his article titled Challenge Accepted that the target deals damage to itself for practical reasons. We couldn't fit her name in the text box again. 6 damage is also significant because Vincent, the Lord of the Pit, has 7 toughness and should survive whatever ghastly food his chef prepares for him. On this card is also the color indicator, a piece of design tech that debuted way back in Innistrad, which denotes a card's color identity. Without this tiny piece of information, it may have actually been impossible to print this card, just as Ethan promised in his video back in 2019. But beyond mechanics and silly references to old lore, I see this card as representative of a very human tendency to play with the plasticity of language. Just like James Joyce in Finnegan's Wake and Aristophanes in The Assemblywomen, this name is a whimsical example of Sesquipedalianism, or rather the practice of using long, obscure words in speech or writing. Elaborate examples like Jamie Charnel's full name, or that one town in Wales. Wait, how do you say it again? Wait, who do I know that speaks Welsh?
Hey Sam, don't worry, I got you. Llanfair pwll gingich gogera chwindrobull llandasilio gogogoch.
Ah, right. Thank you, Maria. They all make their statement and push the limits of the spoken word. This card does the same. So far, it's the only card name in Magic's history that needs a pronunciation guide, or, if you're on Scryfall, that comes with a silly note about how to say it. Long names like these attract attention and give those who are in the know an opportunity to flex their linguistic prowess. I asked Ethan if printing this card brought anything to Magic or design, if it had significance beyond being an inside joke for players of the game. He reminded me that sometimes you just do it for the sake of doing it, and that the party trick is enough a reason as any to warrant its printing. It was nice to be reminded to relax, to take it easy, and to just have fun with the novelty. Now I'm looking forward to when this card will be usurped, when we find a new way to push the limits of a card name into even wonkier spaces. Until then, I encourage you to learn how to say Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar, if only to give yourself insurance when casting Pithing Needle. Thanks for Wait, hold on a second. The dish in Aristophanes' play, The Town in Wales, The Thunderwords, they were all names conceived with intention. There's a difference between wordcraft and gibberish, and just hitting your keyboard a few times and seeing what comes out of it. Furthermore, magic is full of references to literature, especially the earlier cards and especially when Richard Garfield is involved. After spending 2 months saying this name and typing it out into my notes, I started to notice how it was suspiciously full of vowels, which means that it's meant to be pronounced aloud, but it's completely void of the vowel E. I noticed how most of the plosive consonants are D, but it had exactly one T, which is strange because they're virtually interchangeable in this case. How there are no F's or B's or G's or H's, but there are 3 C's and, for that matter, no K's. Essentially, I noticed how it's a very long name made of relatively few letters. And then I noticed how the last group of letters of this conglomerate of a name reminded me of another name from an old book I read in college. I realized it wasn't an accident that this name appeared in the flavor text of Granite Gargoyle. It was a hint. Asmoranomardicadaistinaculdacar isn't a riff on Asmodeus. It's an anagram. I figured it out. Dracula is a Romanian sarcoma addict. Now what the fuck?
There's a certain Welsh village which has become world famous simply because of its name. A name which enables the village to boast one of the longest railway station signs in the world. Situated on the beautiful Isle of Anglesey, it is called Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch. This song will teach you how to say it. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch. A name which has fascinated everyone, a name which is there for all to see. A name you will learn to say to anyone if you listen carefully. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch. Believe me, it's easy when you know how, so I'll teach you in a song. And you will soon be saying it if you simply sing along. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch. Llanfair Pwllgwyngyll Gogerach Chwyrndrobo Llantysilio Gogogoch.